I'll call a special meeting for the Waterworks and Lighting Commission to order on Friday, September 24th, 2014. We'll make note that...
26th.
Oh, sorry, the 26th. I'll make note that all the commissioners are present to review the budget. And we'll hand that over to Jeff.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming in today. What we wanted to do this morning is just walk through the operations and capital budget that management put together, have you review it, any adjustments that may need to be made, discuss those, and ultimately hopefully come out of here with an approved budget. At that point, we would take it to Property and Finance sometime in October, and then from there it would go to the City Council to be approved. So with that, we'll kind of start out. Everyone should have a copy of the budget and a copy of the PowerPoint slides.
And it's a pretty standard, benign budget, nothing out of the ordinary operating wise. And capital, since we've made most of the major improvements the first 5 years, capital starting on the electric side to drop off, which is good. And we're able to at least push stuff off a year or so, because most of the major improvements are already done, so we can try to keep our capital levels at about $1.5 million going forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
All right, thanks. So just kind of a little bit of an overview. As you all know, in Wisconsin, we're very highly regulated by the Public Service Commission. Among other things that they require us to do, they require us to set up our accounting system in accordance with their Uniform System of Accounts, which is adopted from FERC's Uniform System of Accounts. So every utility in the state and basically in the country have the same accounting system, same setup, what's capital, what's operational, how things are capitalized, even down to what account numbers you're using for these things. So it's really detailed as far as what we can and cannot do with that. Those requirements include an accrual-based accounting, so we record expenses and revenues when they're incurred or they're earned. We're not a cash basis accounting. And our assets are capitalized at the end of the year. So during the year, when somebody's working on something that we're going to capitalize, it goes into an asset account called construction work in progress. At the end of the year, we take those and we capitalize them then. It even goes so far as saying we can't capitalize those during the year. We have to wait till the end of the year. One of the requirements is you take the average cost of those assets during the year. So a pole that might get put in Kellner, going in the sand might go in a lot easier than a pole up by the river where they're going through rocks. So at the end of the year, we have to take an average of what those costs were to put those assets in, and that's what gets capitalized that year. We also use activity-based accounting, so labor, benefits, materials, all those get classified to the activity where they're utilized. So if it's overhead line or underground line or water main, all those activities, so somebody's fringe benefits, labor, supplies, if we have any rental equipment or anything, all that goes to that category line or that activity. It's not broken out. We don't have an income statement that breaks out salaries, fringe benefits, supplies, those kind of things. So kind of some of the requirements of our Uniform System of Accounts. When we walk through the budget presentation today, we're going to kind of start in the back and then come back to the front. We've got Dale, Matt, and Todd here to answer any capital questions, so we'll walk through the capital budget first, and then we'll come back and look at the operation and maintenance budget. So our capital budget, we basically do capital for one of three reasons: either to replace our aging infrastructure, ensure service reliability, or lower our O&M expenses. And again, like we just mentioned a little bit ago, since we have to use activity-based accounting, you take those full costs of everything for that activity and go into the cost of that asset. As an example, you can take a look, here's a water main construction. The water main itself costs, in this example, right around $36,000, but the labor, the fringe benefits, any usage, the city to install it, the cost to replace the road, any equipment rental, all that goes into the cost of that water main. And that's the number that's going to be used for pilot, is that $120,000. There's no depreciation. I know we've talked about pilot several times, but there's no depreciation component of pilot, so we're going to pay taxes on that $120,000 until that's replaced. As Jem mentioned a little bit ago, you know, where our capital budget is right now, I just kind of want to give you a real brief history of where the utility came in the last 10 years. Prior to Jem and Todd coming, you know, this is where our capital additions have been. We were averaging about $1.6 million a year. Weren't really keeping up with a lot of the things that needed to be done. Reliability was not as good as it is today. So after that, some really concerted efforts were done. Some large amounts of money were funneled into the electric side to make the system more reliable, replace some of that aging infrastructure, and the system's more reliable for it, but it cost us. You can see the capital in the last 6 years is basically double the 6 years previous. Now we're to a place where capital's in pretty good shape. We're not spending as much. If you look at the budgets right now, we'll walk through each one here in a minute, but we're back down in the electric side to where we were, so we're at that maintaining that level. We're not at having to replace aging infrastructure as much as we were. So for this year, we're looking at a total capital budget around $2.728 million. Last year, the budget we passed initially last October was pretty close to that number. We're looking at about $35,000 more than last year versus having to build new. So if you're kind of maintaining that at that depreciation expense number, you're kind of maintaining your system, you're at where you want to be, and you're getting rid of those assets that need to be done. So we're really in that ballpark right now. So I put a tab, the yellow tab is where the capital section starts on page 15. So if we want to start on page 17 is the electric additions, and we've got Todd here. Hopefully you guys had a chance to look at the budget. There's descriptions after each section, so if you want to take a look and ask any questions about where we're at with that budget today.
What we usually did in the past too, Jeff, is I just kind of went through each description. And then if people had a question on that particular one, we can do that if that's okay with everybody. So the first item, electrical additions, and as it says in the description, what we kind of do is just lump together things, electrical service items, and probably the major item in that is distribution transformers. And I think you've seen in the past, I typically go out for bids in December so that I can order those in January, and what we do is we try to give an estimate of how many distribution transformers we're going to need and at what sizes throughout the year. And that's probably your main cost item in that line number one. Line number two, that was a joint project that we agreed with ATC would be a very useful project for the utility. What we found last year, if certain pieces of the 115 kV equipment stop working at the Baker substation, it isn't properly isolated, and we have to take the entire substation out of service to repair it. So after discussions with ATC, they would like to do a joint project with us where we actually have a second 115 kV line that we bring into the Baker substation, and now if any piece of equipment fails in the Baker substation, we should be able to isolate it. So that's a very worthy reliability project that we're going to take on next year. That can only be done either in the spring or the fall, and right now, you know, we're trying to see if we can get everything in place for the spring, but we're going to repair a switch that we found broke this year in the spring. I'm not sure if we'll get this project all together in the spring, because we have to basically create, or ATC has to create a new tower next to the existing one. So that probably will take a little bit of time, but we'll for sure get all of our pieces of equipment here, so we'd be more waiting on ATC than that they would be waiting on us.
Why spring and fall?
It all has to do with your peak loading, and so in the summer months is when we usually have our highest peaks, and that can happen, it usually will happen in late July, early August, but we try not to do any projects in June, July, or August that could put us in a situation where now we've moved load to a certain place and we might have too much load there than we can handle because we're making repairs on something else in the system. The winter, you have more of a construction issue where we've got to pour cement, footings and things like that. You still have load problems too in the winter if you get really below zero temperatures. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're worried about the weather affecting the project.
It's also a concern with ATC, they don't want any work done. Typically, they want all their transmission available in and out of subs throughout the state during this load periods too. So it's them also that request that we do it when their loads are down, so.
Yeah, so April and September are always really busy months for us here. We're trying to do all of these projects where if you're taking a piece of equipment out of service, then you're, and moving load to somewhere else. And so that's why like the last month's been very busy for us, as is April.
Okay, so there would be a capacity limitation, potential.
Yeah, there's the potential, and it's actually in this case more on the ATC side than the water and light side, because to do this project initially, or if you never did the project and you needed to repair a piece of equipment, you're basically feeding the entire east side of the city from the west side. And it's something that you have a contingency there of something going wrong, and you don't want to have that happen. So you would schedule this project, like I said, in the spring or the fall, and when we do this project, we should hopefully not have to ever do that again, where we're trying to feed the east side from the west side. All right. Moving on, number 3 is underground cable. We typically try to go ahead and do underground cable replacements or new underground installations each year. This 2015 year, what we're going to do is work on the downtown area. When the downtown area was originally put in, the engineering idea behind it was that they would have all these vaults that they'd be working in, and that's where you're actually you got your cable connections. It's a very unsafe practice because you have a guy going into a confined space working on energized cables, and what we've also seen in the past is when we get a lot of rain, 2-3 inches all in a short period of time, all of these cable vaults are flooding. So the idea is that we will use the existing ductwork that we have. We might have to do a little bit of directional boring, but I think we can get by with a lot of the ductwork that's there. But start pulling new cable and make these terminations up in the transformer instead of in the vault. So we'll eliminate the confined space issue, and then we'll have a more reliable underground cable than we have right now. So that's pretty much all the money for number 3 will be in the downtown area next year. Going on to number 4, what we're finding is a lot of our feeder lines leaving the substations are reaching their end of age lifetime, and so we've got both number 4 and number 5 are to start rebuilding our feeders coming out of the substations. So number 4 is what we call the West Rural. That is the line that leaves the West Wisconsin Rapids substation on High Street, and then it feeds part of the businesses that are on West Grand Avenue, and then it leaves town heading towards Marshfield. And that's over 50 years old. A lot of the poles are reaching their end of their lifetime, and so we would be rebuilding and replacing the poles, the arms, and pieces of the wire that we've had problem with that still has some of the original copper wire on it, which has become pretty brittle now. So that's part of that project. Number 5 is rebuilding the feeder, and this is on Pepper Street, and it goes from 16th Street to 3rd Street on Pepper. Now that is a double circuit, and it feeds all the businesses that are on 8th Street, and it's everything south of the expressway basically, and so that's a very critical circuit. What we've had problems with that circuit is the wire on the top circuit is actually broke twice since I've been here. It then falls into the lower circuit, and so we have a complete outage at that time. So again, we would be replacing poles, arms, and wire on Pepper. So that's number 5. Now going on to number 6, what we're doing with that project is years ago when you designed a substation, they didn't have high voltage breakers, or high voltage breakers were much more expensive than fuses. So the design was to put fuses on the 46,000 volt system ahead of the transformers. There's a whole bunch of things that have been invented since then that are cost-effective ways to replace those fuses. And so what we would be doing is putting high voltage breakers in with solid state relaying and then eliminating the fuses. And some of the advantage to that is the reliability for one. You know, if you had a problem with the transformer, only the transformer is taken out of service, so the rest of the substation stays intact. That's one big thing. If you've ever been around when the linemen have to put these fuses in, it's quite a sight because you draw a huge arc as you're throwing the fuses in on such a large transformer. So there's a safety concern there as well. And the other reliability thing that's nice is usually when you blow a fuse, you blow one of the three, and so now you're single phasing three-phase customers. And now with the high voltage breaker, if you have a problem, it just takes the power away completely, so all three phases are gone. So you don't have a problem where a three-phase customer now had equipment fail in their plant because you single phase their three-phase motor or something. So that's that project. Now in 2016, we still have those type of fuses at the Gainer substation, and so that's a line item for 2016. Once we replace both of those, the only place that we would have that left is at Northern Steel Castings, and so that might be an item that we throw in maybe a 2017 or 18 budget, depending on where we're at. If we do that, then we'd have all our high voltage fusing gone at Water and Light, which would be a great accomplishment. Line number 7 is 8th Street lighting. As everybody's aware, we're in the process of looking at LED designs, and once our Public Service Commission rate gets approved, we'll actually be able to move forward and start putting in LED lights in places. 8th Street is probably one of the worst places in the city right now. Most of the underground wire has failed. A lot of the poles are mismatched because they've been hit by cars over the years and a different one's been put in its place, so none of them match anymore. So it's a good beautification project, but it needs to be done because the underground wire has failed. So we have, for the first time, a line item for that. That is not going to replace all of it. That is just going to be a small start, but it'll get us going, and then we'll keep moving forward every year, and that line item will probably be in the budget for quite a few years to come until we're done.
So it'll be LED poles, all
Yeah.
common,
Yeah,
and new wire.
Yep, and probably the most expensive part of the project will be, we'll have to probably directional bore from light to light in that location because there's a lot of underground utilities, so we're probably not going to be able to just trench in a new wire. So that'll be our most expensive part of that project. And when we get closer, I'll be meeting with the city to pick out a pole and a style light. It will not be a decorative one like we've been doing downtown. It'll probably be more like a white fiberglass pole, you know, with the LED fixture type that you see pretty much common through all the expressways and 8th Street. It'll be that type of style. So the next project is phase 3 of a continuing project. The last of our electromechanical relays that we had at Water and Light are in the process of being replaced at the West Substation. That project is going very well. Jim and I were out there this week looking at it, and the electromechanical relays that we had in place, again, probably over 30 years old, were all failing and could no longer be properly calibrated to work the way we would like them to work. The new solid state relays have so much more functionality where you can, one relay can replace 9 of the old style. And so instead of having 4 panels with 60 relays in, we'll have 2 panels with 7 relays in. And it also gives us technology smart information, so when we have faults out at the system, we can actually pull the information up and actually see what happened and in what order. So it gives us a lot of functionality, and we could actually even set it up to dial in and pull up information, that type of thing. We haven't done that yet, but it's a possibility with that. So that's line 8. Line number 9, we started doing this the last 3 years, and that is just to have a line item for miscellaneous tools. Last year what we purchased were a couple pieces of equipment that when you have an underground fault at a home and you have 3 wires that are going to that home, 2 hots and a neutral, As long as 2 out of the 3 wires are intact, you can actually set up this piece of equipment at the meter, and you can just restore power back to the house. And that comes in very handy when it's 20 below zero and this happens on a Saturday. Now you have one lineman go right out to the residence, they set up this piece of equipment, and then we can come back with the crew on Monday and do the work, but we're not bringing in an entire crew for the weekend and try to fix an underground cable fault. So it's handy to have little items like, or a line item like this, so that when we need some type of metering or anything like that, that's what we can charge it to. Line number 10, we have a continuing line item in our budget for animal prevention, just because we have seen that squirrels cause the major problems in our system for outages. So this is the 3rd year now that we've had that item in the budget, and you know, we started now wrapping poles with tin to prevent squirrels from climbing up. Before, what we had done is bought protective covers for the top. Some of the new things we're going to do next year, we found some new products that are actually rollers that you put on the lines or on the pole, and as the squirrel climbs the pole and hits the roller, they actually spin off the roller and fall back to the ground. Or if they're going from pole to pole across the line, they'll hit these rollers and they'll actually spin off the line. So we're going to start putting those at key locations by the substations for key accounts to keep the squirrels off the equipment by the substations. So that's that line item. We have
Is this
seen,
enough?
Um,
I mean, this is huge in terms of what's been
well, and
happening.
I think that's why we're here today. If you guys feel we want to increase that budget, that would be okay. You know, that's your decision.
But they can only, I mean, our trouble truck can only get so many in a year or 2, so,
Right.
because they've got other things they're doing, so I guess time is an issue too. I mean, the riser poles right out of West Wisconsin, we'll have those taken care of once the new squirrel guards get in, but this is for next year. I mean, that'll be taken care of within a week or 2 outside of West Wisconsin.
Yep.
So this would be more distribution circuits and stuff like that.
Will this protect ocean spray?
Well, not to the point where, until they get a UPS in, no. I mean, our system is operated the way it should. It tries to clear a fault 3 times within a second and a half, and then if it doesn't, it'll kill the line. So,
I understand that
Right.
part. but
It'll
I
help.
also
It'll help.
understand that if we can do something about squirrel, we
yeah.
ought to be doing it.
Yep.
When we have, and then that's why we had Jason look online and he found also these wheels, so we'll see if they help too.
Yeah. Yep, and we did have an engineer from Chippewa in this week. We went through everything with them, and he actually used the new relays that we had at the, that we just installed, the project I just talked about, to actually look at the voltages and what all took place. And unfortunately, when that squirrel got into the lines last week, it actually got across 2 different feeders, and once you have an arc established, you can't distinguish the arc unless you take power away from the system. And so what happened was you had an actual 3-phase fault from that squirrel that traveled across 2 different feeders, and that's why the entire west side saw a 1-second power dip as the breaker then opened and cleared everything. So it did do exactly what it was supposed to. Unfortunately, the squirrel found one of the probably the more critical places to get into, and we've already fixed that pole up now, so we shouldn't have any animal problems with squirrels. But like I pointed out, I think in the emails to everybody, these turkey vultures are all at once have shown up on the west side, and there's a flock of probably at least 20 of them out there, and they have pretty good wingspans. I'm surprised that they haven't gotten into something already. The DNR, we contacted them. They are a protected bird. We cannot exterminate them. The only suggestion so far that the DNR had is they would give us material if we wanted to make perching poles for them, which I don't really want to encourage them to stay in the area with the perching pole. So we're still looking into it, but at the moment we don't have a good solution for that. So all these squirrel guards aren't going to do us any good for a bird that can land on top of the pole.
Now they're supposed to be migrating shortly, so we'll see,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Todd, the animal guards that you put in, I know with your number 1 budget item, the 400,000 for the I think the transformers.
Yeah, we could
I just-
absolutely take some from there, Tom, if we got to a point next year where we said, you know what, let's spend a little more money, that could come out of line one if we really wanted to do that.
Do the, I know you talked about, knocking out the 3 phases or whether they got into the wrong place. Do a lot of the animals, can they take out transformers with this?
Well,
Really?
what they'll,
Because I think they're fused, aren't they?
on the single transformer level at a home, that's probably where we see the most problems with the squirrel. They get, every transformer at a person's home, overhead transformer, has what's called a combination switch, and that is, half of it is the fuse, half of it is the lightning arrestor, and that just gives that squirrel that opportunity to get up in there. And the 2 things we've done with that is we've put these new covers on, so the spacing is greater, so the squirrel isn't long enough to get across it. The other thing we're looking at doing is on the cabling, that there's just a small, like 4-foot piece of cable there. If we were to buy insulated cable for that application, that would give us a little more protection. So that's what we're trying to do there, but yeah, absolutely, that'll take out that home's transformer if that squirrel gets in the wrong spot. Now, when it comes to taking out a 3-phase transformer, that's not going to happen with the squirrel, but what is going to happen is you're going to see what we saw in the last 2 weeks, where an arc gets established, and once it jumps across the air, it doesn't extinguish itself. It's going to just keep arcing, and the only way to get rid of it is you actually have to physically open the breaker and take the energy away, and that snuffs out that arc, and then the breaker closes back in. And the way all the equipment is designed to work like that in the substations is it sees that problem, it goes through a 1-second open and then close. It looks for that problem, is it still there or isn't it? Like if it's a branch and it started the arc, and now did the branch continue and fall to the ground, or is the branch still laying on the wires? And so it actually goes through that process 3 times. And after the 3rd time, if the problem's still there, then it completely opens up, and now the customer is out of power until the lineman comes in to fix the problem. So,
I have one other question about, talking, I think the 46 kV fuses at the high school, and you mentioned Northern Steel
yeah.
with the dedicated, I always know about the dedicated transformer. Do you do oil testing on that transformer?
Yeah, every substation transformer, and that includes Northern Steel castings, gets tested in the spring. So we have an outside company that comes in, they take an oil sample of every substation transformer, and every other year I've been taking samples of the regulators in the substations as well. But then they do this oil analysis, and they're able to look for minute gases in the oil, and depending on what type of gas is in there, they can actually tell you what part of the transformer is failing, or if it's not failing at all. So it could be an insulation failing, it could be a loose connection in the transformer causing a certain type of arcing inside, and again, that's a gas they detect, and then they give me a report, and knock on wood, but our transformers are all looking really well right now.
Good.
Last year, the only one that had a flag was Northern Steel Castings. It had a little more water in the oil than it should have. And so we actually went ahead this year, we took it out of service for a day. We found some gasketing on the top of the transformer that was failing, and so water was getting into the oil. So we think we have that problem solved. We've refiltered all the oil in it, and now next spring we'll find out if that fixed the problem or didn't fix the problem. So.
Thank you.
Yep, so getting back,
I'd like to go back to squirrels.
okay.
Are we protected from a squirrel standpoint for ocean spray? Are we or aren't we? To me, here's my perspective.
Yep,
This is an organization that has the capacity to expand.
Right.
We have the cranberries in this area,
Right.
okay? We've already lost the possibility of an expansion in the past because of some of these reliability issues with regard to infrastructure.
Right.
Okay? What's been happening this year, if you look at this, not necessarily from the local level, but if you look at it from the corporate level,
right,
they would have to say, that's not the place to expand,
right.
okay? So this is critical for our community.
Right. And I guess what I'd like to say about that is, yes, we are taking measures to make sure it doesn't happen. Now, we can't control the animal population. They can get into things. But I've also went to Ocean Spray, tried to work with them on this, and when they have these 1-second outages, they could be purchasing equipment to help them ride through these outages. You know, I worked at the paper mill for 18 years. We had these same type of outages there. All the paper mills have electrical engineers on staff and qualified electricians on staff. And those type of problems were solved at the paper mill level because, yes, you're trying to fix it from both sides. And so we would put in UPS protection, we put in surge protection. And so when you had this 1-second outage, you didn't lose a paper machine for hours because a PLC went down. And we've tried to tell them that, and you know, and I understand from a business side, they don't like to share things because it's a competitive business. But we don't know, after we gave them recommendations, did they actually take that to heart and do anything about it? Because they're not telling us yes or no.
In my past, I've called on some of the biggest key accounts in the country, State Farm Insurance, ADM, country companies. They had this stuff figured out 20 years ago. I mean, you cannot prevent every bump on a utility system. And we're doing everything we can to deliver as reliable power as we can, but we still can't guarantee that they're not going to see a 1-second bump. They're not seeing 20-minute outages.
Yeah.
They're seeing a bump they can ride through.
Yeah, and
So
we've had some really major lightning storms this year, and Ocean Spray never saw a bump from any one of those from, you know, equipment that we put in to make it more reliable. But they could have very, very easily saw that same 1-second bump if one of the lightning strikes hit one of their poles. And so, you know, why, and the cost of that UPS equipment is not that expensive, so why they're not taking the time to invest in that is, I don't understand.
So, okay. We need to influence that as well.
Correct.
And I saw the regs that you shared with us all.
Mhm.
You know, I think we have to continue to try and convince them to do that, no
Mhm.
question about that.
Yep.
But also, it seems that if there is a way to prevent the squirrel population from being influenced, then we need to be aggressive with that supply line
Yes,
from our standpoint.
I totally agree. Yep.
And we can, you know, if you got some time, we can show you all the things we've done out there on those riser poles too. So. And we're continue to do more as we get more
Yeah,
information.
and you know, one of the line items we talked about is that west rural feed. Just by doing the work of replacing the poles and the wire and the arms on that, that's going to help the reliability on the west side. So ultimately, that's going to help too with the Ocean Spray issue, where there wouldn't. We're going to make sure when we do that that every tree and every branch is out of the way of that, so that nothing on the rural line could cause a bump to see on the west side as well. So we are trying to do whatever we can do on our end. So.
Does the aluminum really help when you put it on the pole? Or?
It was an idea one of our linemen had and came up with, and I think it will actually help, because I think that when that squirrel gets to that part, there's about a 4-foot piece of aluminum, and I don't know, they're very nifty critters. Maybe he can get past it, but I think it'll at least deter him from climbing any higher. So.
So it's a good try, that's
Yeah,
for sure.
it's you know, we're doing our best. Like I said, then he looked online, he found these new rollers that people have seen, and there's actually like a video on it, and they show the squirrel rolling off it. So we're gonna get some of that and start trying that next too.
You know, I never thought that we would be talking about squirrels as much as we do.
Me neither, Tom.
I mean, this is one of a key issue of
Yeah.
people losing power.
I know. Yeah, I agree. So.
You know, we had this at our own home. Okay, there's a transformer right over my drive.
Yep.
And you installed some kind of like needle
Yep.
protectors.
We have that's what we started years and years ago, actually, before I even got here. And that helps too, but what we found is they'll actually go right around those a lot of times, so.
But we haven't had a dead squirrel in the driveway since that was installed.
Okay, so that's helped too, yeah, so we keep trying to come up with solutions. So going back to the budget.
Okay.
Number 11 is some fiber optic cable. Now, what we did 6 years ago when we installed the AMI system and the SCADA system is at that time we went with the lowest cost, easiest to install means of communicating with all the equipment out there. So when our main computer at our building is either talking to our AMI radios or AMI system, or our SCADA system is using radio communication. Now in the past few years, what we've done is added fiber optic cable that goes from this building out to the Peach substation, to the South Water Tower, out to the Baker substation and the high school substation. That fiber's been very reliable. It's also very quick, and we really have not had any issues with it. So last summer, we had the problem where some more of our radios were getting jumped on, the frequency bandwidth was getting jumped on by somebody else, and we had communication problems. And so what we decided to do is start putting in more fiber optic cable to our equipment. So this is a line item to put fiber optic cable from the South Water Tower to the West Water Tower. And then if there's any money left of that 100,000, what we're gonna do is start doing some dedicated runs to some of our either wells or AMI equipment that's out there. So, and with that, and the last item in the budget is a contingency where we always keep that line item in there for some miscellaneous unforeseen expense that might come up. So that ends the capital part of the electrical budget.
Just to go back to item number 1 for a second.
Yeah.
These transformers, this is just based on the normal expected life of the transformers? Is that-
Well, what we, you know, we have new services getting put in, so that's part of that transformers. We'll have transformers that fail throughout the year, whether it's a lightning hit or something like that. So that's part of the transformers we purchase. We'll have, like last year, we purchased an awful lot of transformers for the Buren area because we were getting rid of all of our oddball voltages that were out there. And by the end of the year now, we're gonna be at a constant 13,200 volt distribution system, which will be the first time in the history of the company that we have one uniform voltage, which means we're gonna be able to get rid of all these extra spares that have been sitting in the yard that are at 2,400 volts, 4,160 volts, or 12,470 volts. So that's going to be just a project I think everybody's ecstatic about, and we're very close to getting there. We're finishing up the last piece out after Anchor Bay out in the Buren system, and then everything in the system is uniform voltage. So.
Any other electric questions?
Just out of curiosity, on that 3, the URD downtown,
Yes.
is that the old lead?
No, that shouldn't have any lead in it, but it is cable that was installed. Some of it was installed in like the early 70s, and when they manufactured that type of cable, they must have not had as good of insulation, and so compared to the cable that you can buy now that has almost a lifetime warranty, the cable that was put in the 70s is starting to fail now.
And it may have some asbestos in it, but not lead.
Yeah.
I mean, we've taken some out recently that's had asbestos in it.
Yeah, no,
You're gonna replace it all, really?
Yeah, we're gonna replace the cable itself. The ductwork should be able to, we should be able to just reuse what we have. But we're gonna, when we pull it, we'll be pulling longer lengths than are there now, and we'll actually bring the terminations up above ground and have them in the transformer compartments. So, yeah, so.
Gosh, that brings back some bad memories.
So well done, Todd.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Well done.
All right, if there's no other questions for Todd, we can move on to page 21 is where the water capital piece is coming. I can turn it over to Dale for kind of explanations and any questions.
In the water budget, you can see item number 1, we have various streets that we want to replace water main on, working with the city on that. Chestnut, First Street North, Apple Street, and 17th Avenue North. This is replacing water main that's old, outdated, and as long as you turn up the street, it makes common sense to replace the infrastructure as long as you got the street tore up. You know, Dylan, when you say old and outdated, is that like crack breaking, you suspect there may be leakage? Yeah, that, and there, sometimes we don't have a lot of breaks on that section of pipe, but it's at the age where if you repair the street and redo it all, sure as heck you're gonna have a break. You know, tear up a perfectly good road again, so it's just kind of pays to replace it while you got it all tore up. And the water main is typically 50 years or more in age, so it's old cast iron, so it's needs to come out.
Dale, are any of these areas where we had freeze-ups last winter?
There has been freeze-ups in the area as far as service freeze-ups, but a lot of them could be on the customer side and not ours. The biggest issue we had with water main freeze-ups last winter was over on 3rd and 2nd Street South. I think it was between the airport and 2 Mile. We had that water main freeze over there, and we replaced that because it was broken, and we actually insulated it, so hopefully the possibility of freezing is a lot less. So we address it when we can. Item number 2 is this update water meters in the system as needed. We are virtually 100% AMI on everything except for some key accounts that are in industries or whatever where you can't get a reading out, or the meter itself will not take the AMI conversion, and that's stuff that over time will be replaced and hopefully get all AMI, but you always will have a handful of them that you can't get the reading, so that'd be a few of them. So our replacement numbers have dropped down drastically because, like I say, everything's pretty much AMI now, so we're completely converted. Line 3 is routine replacement of fire hydrants. We're going through a process now of flushing hydrants in town, and we've come across a few that were not working and broken or whatever. We couldn't repair them, so we always try to keep replacing an average about 10 hydrants per year just to keep up with old ones that are either broken or not working and keep them up to date. Sometimes the worst thing you get is the fire department call and say this hydrant doesn't work when you wanted it, so we try to keep that ongoing.
And those 10 are above and beyond any of the water main construction areas? Those are built into those
That's built
areas?
right
So, I mean, we might be doing 20 hydrants next year, but these are just the 10 random that we find around the city.
Item 4, we have some chlorine feed solenoids that we replaced here several years ago, and we're finding that they're not lasting like they should, so it's pretty expensive, like $100 a piece just for the parts to rebuild them all the time. And we found a solenoid which is it's a little bigger, heavier duty solenoid that will actually work longer and not have to be repaired as often. We have a kind of the counterpart to it out of collector 4, and we very seldom have to replace or repair them, so this will be a copy of that to cut down our problems with solenoid failures. And then the other part of that is a locating device for locating water main and services, similar to what they use now for like when you do call for locates and you trace down electrical lines and so forth. It's a locator designed for frequency for tracing water mains and services. Came in really handy last year when we had all those freeze-ups. We actually had our neighbors to the south, Town of Rome, they were nice enough to come up, they have one, and they located some services out, because when we had to drill to a main, you had to be precise on where that main lied. So when you drill down to it to get the connection for thawing, it saved a lot of hunt and peck type stuff, and this will work great too for just tracing out those services where we're really not sure where they are, so we can, if you have to do repairing, you know where it's at rather than digging up a bigger area in the street. So it's going to be a very handy tool. Item number 5, utilities working to install monitoring and control devices in the filter plant. Todd and I are working on trying to move forward on that. It's just something that's an update to the filter plant, automation part of it, controls and stuff, so it works into the SCADA and stuff. So it's just an ongoing project to try and get to the end of it.
Yeah, to chime in on that, so the areas that are left up there are, all of the filter beds still have the older style PLC that we're replacing with the modern, what's called a Control Logic L62 processor. So we need to, I need to write the programming for that, and then we need to eventually change out the processor and all the wiring in the cabinets. Once we do that, we'll have the entire water process will be all on the new style Allen Bradley processors. which is a lot more reliable, a lot more easier, user-friendly for programming and looking at things. So I'm excited to get to that point. Then what's left is the alarming software as far as calling in operators if we have like a low water level while we don't have operators here. So I'm working with Matt this year where we're adding some server upgrades and some software upgrades for reporting and alarming. So that's kind of all covered both in Dale's budget and Matt's budget.
Todd, wasn't we just automated the water system, is this something beside?
No, well, we're not done is what it is.
Okay.
Over the last 3 years, we started at the wells and we replaced all the processors at the wells with the newer style. Then in the process itself, up in the filter plant, we started adding modulating valves and variable pumps for the liquid chemicals, and we switched to all new liquid chemicals. We started bringing that into all new processors, and now what we got left is some older equipment on older processors that we're moving over to the new equipment. And so it's kind of been about a 4-year project, and we could have put a huge line item in and had an outside contractor come in or engineering firm and just do it all. But then we would have been stuck with what we had, and that was a program written by an outside contractor that nobody understood. And every time we needed help with it, we had to call a company in the Twin Cities and have them come out and make a modification. So now all the programming was done by me, and so and Moses is working with me on it too. I'm teaching him on it, so we both understand it. But now anytime Dale or an operator or somebody says, what would be nice if we did this, I can say, no problem, I'll work on that today, we'll get it going for you, and it's no added cost to our company. So,
Good.
yeah.
Item number 6 is a connection to Buren. This has been a recommendation by the DNR for several years. Actually, many years ago, they talked about having us connect to Port Edwards, and that never happened. This is something that it's not a have to do, it's just a recommendation on their part. If we don't feel we want to do it, we don't have to. Also, we'd have to go through PSC approval on it and everything else. Like I say, it's kind of supposed to benefit both communities, but if something were to happen to us where we needed extra water, they're a small system. They can only supply us like maybe up to 800 gallons a minute, maybe 1,000 if we're lucky, but that's not going to take care of the whole city. So it'd be a Band-Aid. We'd have to isolate and shut down everything to keep the crucial accounts in water. So I don't know if it's actually a feasible thing or not. Like I say, it's a suggestion is all it is.
Be much more benefit to Buren, because we
Yeah,
could supply whatever they needed if they had a catastrophic.
Would that be a joint cost with Buren?
They would pay their portion of the cost.
Is
correct?
Buren interested in that?
They were hot to trot. It was not even this year, I think it was last year, we started negotiating an agreement, and then the attorneys got into a disagreement on liability. So that's where it was left. Now, I think they've been approaching Dale again more
Yeah, right now
recently.
it's a simplified connection and a solution to all the problems. It'd just be a connection with a valve in either end and a hydrant that you can flush it out either direction if ever needed to purify the line. And there wouldn't be no meters involved as far as recording. What you do is you take an average 3-day usage before the connection was opened, and then keep track of your usage afterwards until it's closed to offset the cost. You charge the community one way or the other.
Yeah.
So it's
And that's like $30,000.
right. And that was what we came up with at this point, like I say. So it's something we don't have to pursue. It's just a recommendation by them, by the DNR. So
Yeah.
What happened to the port discussion?
It was before my time.
from what I remember, like I say, I just hear a little bit from what trickled down back then. I really don't know what happened, if it was a communication between the two communities or they decided it wasn't feasible for them. I think it was kind of like a similar situation with Buren. It's more advantageous for them than us. Like I say, we're taking steps to secure our stuff. We have connections made at the collectors, for example, for portable generators to hook up to it to operate in case we lose the power lines or whatever. We're taking steps on our system to make us more reliable. Like I say, it's something, so if we're more reliable, do we actually need that connection from them? You know, like I say, it's more for their benefit than ours. So like I say, it's something that doesn't have to be done, it's just a DNR recommendation. So,
Yeah, and you said like 800 or 1,000 gallons a minute. How beneficial would that be to us?
like I say, we're putting out, right now, we're bringing in right now today like 3,000 gallons a minute.
3,000?
Yeah.
So not much good.
So it's like a trickle out of a garden hose for where we normally go through.
How about both ways, from Port and Bearing?
I don't really know what Port has. I never really, like I say, I wasn't involved in it, and I never really checked into it. So I don't know what they could do.
Okay.
And then, like I say, just the final thing would be the contingency, is this small pot in case we run into something that we have to replace, and I'll have to come back to the commission for approval on to get us through.
Dale, back up to number 6 just a moment. How do you feel about this? This is a recommendation from the DM, but how do you feel as the man in charge of water here?
Well, at one time I thought it was really a good idea, but then once we found out just how much they can actually supply us, my enthusiasm dropped off on it. I mean, I'm all for helping out your neighboring community, whatever, and we can still do that. I think when we did the expansion here, we actually were shut down, we couldn't do nothing. We had a plan in place that we could hook up hydrant to hydrant with a sterilized hose above ground to take care of us for that short time frame if we needed it. So, like I say, in reality, my enthusiasm dropped off a lot once I found out what they can actually give to us. Not sounding greedy, but I mean, we can supply whatever they need going the other way. So, realistically, maybe it's not something that we really need to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the water capital budget? If not, we can start looking on page 23 is the information systems department. We can turn it over to Matt and we can kind of walk through some of the items we're requesting there.
Yeah, we can start. The first 4 items are just the standard items I have in my budget every year. Item number 1 covers the standard workstation replacement. This year is 5 workstations. And then replacing the server for the SCADA system to accommodate the new software that Todd will purchase next year for the SCADA system upgrades. Let's see. So item number 2 is just hardware replacement. That's in the budget so that if a printer goes down or if we lose a plotter or a scanner copier, we're able to replace it without having to come back, and that's only a $5,000 item. Usually a printer's only a couple $100, so we don't really need a large amount in that line item. So item number 3 is new hardware, and that's just the standard anything we would need for new hardware this year. It includes 2 ruggedized tablets, which we're not actually replacing systems, we're buying new for the water department. It was a request put in through Dale after we tested the tablets this year. They worked really well for the water department, and they'd like to get 2 more so that they're able to spread the load, the workload across all their crew members. And item number 4, new software. So what that line item is for is if we find a piece of software that's needed at some point that we don't own or we don't have licensing for, that would allow us to purchase it at that time. Item number 5 is the new SCADA software upgrades for Todd and Dale's project. And what that'll do is that allows them to...
That's the.
Oh no, we're at the move server room, sorry. I skipped ahead one. Move the server room. So Jeff he stepped out, but he's been working hard to reduce the amount of paper records we have stored down in the basement. What that did is that opened up an area of a room down there, which is right directly below the current server room that we have. And what we're finding out is that NERC and FERC are pushing to have the SCADA, all SCADA systems completely separate physically and through the network from any other network equipment. So what this would allow us to do is kind of get ahead of NERC and FERC before they actually pass that type of regulation and move the network equipment, the current, just the normal network stuff that everybody uses in the office, down into the basement directly below the server room we have now. It's a short move. It would require very little effort to actually move it down there. The largest part of that piece of the budget would be climate control because it's really quite damp down in the basement. So that's what line item number 5 would cover for us.
And those NERC requirements are coming, that's what you read about, all this cybersecurity stuff
Right.
that they're looking at. It's
Just
just
to
a matter of
completely
time.
isolate
Yeah,
data from
correct.
SCADA.
Yep.
And you do have interfaces today.
Well, they're on the, yes, they're on the same, so well, separate.
It's basically in the same room, and it's on the same UPS, and so what they're really trying to drive for is nobody has access to that server room unless they're approved as a person that can go in there. Well, right now, because we've got both the office equipment in there for the server, and then we've got the SCADA equipment in there for a server, there's more traffic in there that you have. So they physically want a separate blocked down room just for SCADA equipment. It's kind of where it's headed. So it's already from a electrical security, firewall and whatever separated, but it isn't from a physical separation.
But what about data?
Data is separate.
It's
Totally
completely
separate.
separate.
Yeah, it's,
already, yeah.
it's a separate server, it's a separate communication network, everything is separate.
So the only risks then would be some of your own hardware, tablets, whatever.
Yeah,
with
really
interface.
the only risk is you got a lot more traffic going in and out of that room, and so you want to just kind of isolate that. So.
I don't understand, you said data is separate from,
Yeah, you have separate serving equipment that runs all of the office computers, and they all communicate on that server, and then you've got another server in there that handles all of the phone system, and then you have another server in there that handles the AMI system, and then you have another server in there that handles the SCADA system. It's all in the same physical rack plugged in, but there's no cabling between the SCADA system and anything else. But now what we'd physically do is put a brand new rack in the basement, move the phone, move the office, move the AMI down there, so now you don't have other personnel going into the SCADA room because we're looking at equipment for some other system.
thanks.
Yeah.
Now we have the SCADA software line. And that's just Todd's new version of the SCADA server software, which will go on along with the server that we will purchase with line item number 1. Number 7, this is a project, a joint project, actually statewide. Wood County contacted us and the city. The city is also participating in this. And what this is orthophotography is basically a picture of the landscape that's done by a company called Ayers. And what they did is they got a whole bunch of different community organizations, counties, cities, utilities. They brought us all together in an organization called WROC. And what they're going to do is, instead of taking our portion and then we pay them separately for, however many thousands of dollars to take pictures, they brought it all together, expanded the area so that we could break that cost apart between the different communities. They only have to do one flyover instead of having to schedule a bunch of different ones, collect a whole bunch of different ortho areas, and provide that information to us. So our portion of that, split with the city, is 50,000. I believe the city's portion of it ends up being 25,000. Our service territory obviously extends past city limits, so that's why our portion's a little larger. And what that then provides us is with new photography, new landscape photography for the GIS system. It's the cheapest possible way we could get that information.
Excuse me, man, is that like the pictures that we saw in Manitowoc when they were showing it? Is that roughly what that is?
Kind of the same idea, right, where it'll lay on top of our foliage management and everything, that you can see the houses and service lines and everything.
Makes more sense for that, okay.
And line item number 8 is just the standard. If we have to create any reports or do any modifications to the iView system through NISC, that covers that.
Any other questions for Matt on the IS budget? If not, we can move to page 25. Chad joined us to talk about some of the common areas that we're looking at having the capital budget for next year.
All right, line item 1 is just seal coating the parking lot and all of our collectors. Blacktop's getting old, cracking, needs to be taken care of. Just extends the life of all the pavement. Line item 2 would be the air conditioning down in the offices here. The systems are original to the building. They're expensive to run. They're getting outdated. You can't get parts for them for the controls, so on and so forth there. What we'd like to do is replace that with the same type of system we used in the other engineering area, which is working pretty good for us. It would just be strictly a nice update. Cleans everything up. It's more cost efficient to run. For line item 3, right now we have one welder in our fleet that actually runs. We did buy that last year because we had all the freeze-ups. It was a terrible winter. They're calling for another bad winter. In the past, we've always used had two in our fleet. The 2 we ended up selling because they were from the 70s, and this past winter we used them up. They were no longer safe to use, didn't run, both of them had different problems. So we'd like to buy another one. If we have another bad winter, we are going to need it because one will not keep up.
And would that give you 2 welders?
That would give us back to 2 because right now we have one good one and that's it.
In the past, have you used more than 2?
This last year we actually ended up renting one. We had the 2 and then we bought one. So we had 3 to 4 going for what, 2 months?
The welders are used for more than just this too. They can be used for if you need generation for this hand tools or whatever out of somewhere going to run traffic lights or something like that, like we experienced here in the past.
Yeah, this last storm we used one.
110 generation as well, so it's a dual purpose thing. It's not just for thawing services, it can be used for other things as well.
Do you do any welding with them? No.
But you have to have the welder. It's a welder generator. You have to have the DC current of the welder output to do the thawing that we need to do. So it's...
And these are made specially for thawing pipes now? Or are these just welders?
We adapt them to our needs.
Okay.
Any other questions? We're good with that? Okay. Line item 4. Our storage building out here is quite cluttered. The floor space we could really use to store other items. So what this is talking about here is the pallet racking. We'd like to do basically 2 walls that would get all of our wire and cable inventory off of the floor so we could park trucks, equipment, everything like that. And we'd be able to actually inventory easier when everything has a designated area. Line item 5, we have large commercial air dehumidifiers rather. They take quite a beating in our plant with the chemicals and so much moisture. We have the life expectancy is not as high as it would be in other applications. We've got a couple of them right now that are down. We'd like to buy a couple more, well, 3 more, because now with this new addition, we've got a lot of water standing on the floors we need to get taken care of. So we're running fans and small dehumidifiers right now. If we buy these, it would clean everything up well and replace the ones that are broke right now.
What are these? Are these like air condensers that?
Just big dehumidifiers. They're about this big, say about this tall. Just like a home dehumidifier, it's just a large commercial unit. They handle more air is basically all. You know, for the larger areas throughout the plant. We use them at the well houses. You know, there's a lot of water going through there. The pipes all condensate and drip on the floor, and so that we use them to take care of all them issues.
Is there any materials that we should be using that we're not, if they're failing prematurely?
There's really nothing. It's corrosion.
Yeah.
A lot of it's just corrosion on the. They're not really prematurely. It's just because of the chemicals in the air and because of the harsh conditions that they run nonstop, and without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, this is the best way to do it. I mean, they last years and years. I can't give you an estimate. We're talking probably 10 years on average.
And these are all probably the ones we're using now are too small for the work it's being asked to do, so that's why he wants to beef them up.
Yeah. For line item 6, we've got 2 air compressors in the shop. One's actually for the filter plant, and one is for the actual shop, you know, using air tools. The one for the shop is very outdated. You can't get parts for that either. The company's actually no longer in business. So that one we'd like to replace, and the other one's in need of repair. So that's what that item is for there. For line item 7, we bought that tractor last year, and it's been working out very well for us. There's so many implements that we can use. We're just asking for allowing some money for basically pallet forks. We can move transformers, anything that's palletized. Even, you know, our forklift isn't made for off-road. If we go out to our pole yard, we could use that tractor out there. That's 4-wheel drive. It's made for off-road, obviously. We can use it to move many more things that when the forklift gets stuck, things like that.
And these implements would be like chains and stabilizers when you haul something odd that you.
Yeah, anything like that. What we're thinking is the pallet forks, and they actually make a trailer mover. We have a lot of trailers in our shop that are in tight confines. Our shop, we're getting more and more equipment. Our shop's staying the same, which is fine, but we can't get trucks back to some of the trailers, so we're using our forklift now. And if we had that pallet or that trailer mover for that tractor, it'd be better than using the forklift that we're doing now. It would just help. So it's items like that. There's nothing specific besides the pallet forks for sure.
How's the weight distribution on that tractor? You mentioned go to a pole yard. You gotta be careful of what you lift up, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. We have a concrete pad where all our transformers actually are. So it's basically just getting to the areas through the driveway and the dirt there, like our forklift can't sometimes do.
Okay.
You know, if we could get the forklift to the area, then it's no problem, because we have the concrete, so it's level ground. It's just sometimes in the rain or whatever, you know, in the driveway's all dirt, so the forklift sometimes gets stuck.
We ran into that problem years ago where I was working at a spot, and we built our forks for the front of the tractor.
Yep.
But didn't click upstairs. We picked something up that was a little bit too heavy and whoops.
Yeah, that happens quite a bit. Line item 8 is a small tool allowance, as it says. For tools in the shop, right now everything's getting so electronic more and more every year. I'm asking for some money just set aside for scan tools for code readers. So when we have a trouble light, an engine light, I can take care of the problem in-house rather than sending it to a dealer unless it's a warranty item. So that we're just more versatile in the shop then. Can take care of more of my own problems. And then just the contingency fund for the unknown.
Any other questions on the common capital improvements? You notice our concrete work got done too, Mr. Building and Grounds?
That's building and grounds, that's got me, I thought we had the parking lot taken care of.
We asphalted a big area of it that was all cracked and in bad repair, but the rest of it needs to be seal coated next year so we don't have to replace it all. So we didn't seal coat, right? We got a big patch
Patches,
out, right?
correct. Yeah, it was patches.
See, that and then the fact that, like Dale updated me on the sidewalks, I had the feeling that we were replacing the sidewalks, not a piece here and a piece there.
No, well,
But-
we
and then he
replaced
explained-
big pieces, yeah. But they was all driven by the city inspection, most of it. And then we had to redo our back drive, because it was all beat up.
This 2016 replace filter plant external wall, what's the story there?
Out back here on the east side, where it's galvanized tin, if you know what I'm talking? We have, from the lime silo being taken down, and just throughout the years, there's penetrations through the wall for plumbing, piping, conduit, all that kind of stuff. We've patched it, you put a patch over it, you seal it. There's only so many things we can do. The lime silo is a big one, but there's big holes in it. The windows are terrible up there. There's places where you can literally see right through the wall to the outside elements. It's light, and every year I actually go through and I'll re-caulk, reseal the outside. But because now we have holes like this and many holes round for conduit, we'd like to actually replace that to actually seal it better, and then we don't have the outside elements getting in, critters, bugs, things like
It'll be a
that.
project where we'll do it a year where we don't have hardly any other common improvements, so that's why we kicked it to 2016. And Chad wanted to do that this year, but we already had a lot of stuff in the common capital, so we deferred it to next year, hoping we wouldn't have many other things in there, and then we could just tackle that project.
And it makes sense too from the SCADA system, because by next year I'll have all the old antennas down, so then we'll have all that conduit and wire off of that side of the building too. So.
But I thought it was gonna be less expensive than $140,000, but he's getting other options too as we look at it for 2016. And that was pretty much bare minimum. I don't even know what was it they were gonna put up, out back? It was
If we didn't do this proposed one,
well, what was this proposal?
what's out there right now is a 2-inch thick steel on steel, like a garage door, basically, with insulation in the middle. So you have a finished surface on the outside and the inside. So now we don't have to finish the walls like a drywall or a tin on the inside. So you're not doing it twice. So it's I believe they're 3-foot sections, a wall panel. They all snap together just like siding, but they're vertical. And it's just a continuation of a wall, so it's all sealed together. We could stud wall it out like a regular house wall. Then you have to finish the outside and the inside. The cost savings was very, very minimal compared to this tin, this wall here.
Have you looked at pre-stressed concrete?
No.
And that
Might
was
be worthwhile.
kind of
We looked at a lot of options
Because, yeah,
before it's in the budget, but.
because like the paper mill walls are basically a concrete slab,
Okay.
and it's put up in sections.
Right.
And I know when we were in the day of expanding paper machines, that was the most economical.
Okay. We'll definitely take a look.
The original intent when they built the building was that wall was left as a kind of like a temporary wall in case you want to expand again, you'd have to tear into major structure to remove it, so.
Yeah, well, the concrete is probably not a temporary wall.
But now we're hearing that, I mean, when we ultimately do have to build another well, we won't expand up here, we'll actually do pre-treatment at the well, so we won't have the need to expand that filter plant here. So that's why Chad started looking at permanent fixes for it.
Okay, so as you can see, as we went through the capital budget, it's a lot of needs and not necessarily wants and above and beyond things. So I don't know if there's any other questions or adjustments that we want to look at in the capital side. If not, we can move on to the operation and maintenance side. The difference between operation and maintenance is going to be your projections of revenues and costs with next year's operations. You have to remember, our utility revenue is not guaranteed. We definitely have a good commercial and industrial load that's pretty consistent, but since we're higher in residential than a lot of our comparables, weather can definitely affect our revenue more than them. Looking back at this last year, 2013 compared to 2014, rainfall in August of last year was right around 1/2 inch. Rainfall this year in August was closer to 9 inches. So nobody was sprinkling their lawns, we didn't have those issues, people just weren't using as much water, so our revenue takes a hit on the water side. The same thing with electric. This year, August versus last year, August, we didn't hit 90 degrees this year in August, and the average high was like 8 degrees lower this year than last year. So we had a little bit less usage in those months, and that's consistent across the state and probably across the Midwest. One of the things that did kind of help us this year was the cold winter. If we wouldn't have had the cold winter this year, we would really be hurting this year, but our usage in January and February was about 10% higher this year than last year, just because more residential using electric heat or blowers on their furnaces or those things, so that electric usage.
Helped electric to kill the water earnings.
Exactly. So just with our makeup being more highly residential dependent than other utilities in the state, these things do affect us a little more than others. And expenses really vary from year to year, depending on if it's a maintenance requirement, an outage, or a water main break. Some of the large capital projects we're talking about in the system, if we do the projects ourselves with internal labor, that labor cost is being capitalized, or otherwise it's going to be expensed to a maintenance of overhead lines or flushing hydrants or whatever they're working on. And storm damage can definitely vary. I mean, I just took a look at the last 2 storms we had the last 2 years. This last storm we had in August took out a lot more poles, so a lot more of those costs are going to be capitalized and not seen in the operational budget. Or the storm in 2013 didn't take as many poles down, it just hit, trees hit the lines, took the lines down, so the guys had to go up, put the lines back up. That's an operational cost. So you might have the same damage, but depending on what it hits, how it hits, you're going to have different expenses, either capital or operational. And looking at the water side, if there's a water main break, if the guys get down there, see that they can just put a sleeve on it and patch it, that's an operational expense. If they have to go in and cut out 10 feet of pipe and replace that piece of pipe, all of a sudden that becomes a capital cost. So the operation and maintenance budget isn't as clear cut as you would hope it would be between the revenue fluctuations and expenses on how they hit. Can definitely vary from year to year, but I think we have a pretty good handle on it this year. I just wanted to make everybody aware there are several touch points between our budget and the city's budget. Just kind of where we're at with those things. The joint meter costs, we'll talk about the joint meter costs a little bit when we get to the water budget, but we shared that estimate with the city. The joint meter cost essentially is just the charge that we charge the wastewater commission for processing and collecting sewer bills. Water main, Dale's been working really closely with the city, and our plans that are in our budget tie out to the city's current plan for water main construction in 2015. We do have the shared position of the GIS position over at City Hall. The budget has that at the same level as 2014, so we would be contributing to that position at the same level in 2015. And our pilot estimate, we've shared those numbers back and forth and agree with what those numbers are going to be, so that's our tax to the city for the capital we have inside the city limits. So a lot of the touch points have already been agreed upon, so hopefully there's not any of the issues that we had last year in dealing with the city. Just wanted to kind of a high level couple items on revenue and expenditures, and then we can walk into each individual pages. But as far as operating revenue, we're looking at a 5.25% rate increase in 2015. At this point, we still don't have information back from the Public Service Commission as far as what those rates are going to look like going forward. So in our budget, we're just looking at a flat 5.25% across all rate classes.
And we've actually applied for 5.75.
We applied for, what we requested was a 6.5% rate of return in our initial application. They knocked that down to 5.75% rate of return, which comes out to about a 5.5% rate increase. And what we have budgeted on here on the water side is a 2% increase in water rates. We're showing in here that we would file a simplified rate case. And water has what they call a simplified rate case, and the process takes between 2 and 6 weeks on their side, and you submit the report saying you want to file this rate increase. They take a look at where you're at as far as your rate base, and if you're a utility our size, which is a Class AB utility, you have 5 years from the last time you file a rate case. They'll approve this, and it gives a 3% rate increase across the board of all your rates, both your fixed charges and your variable charges. So what they want to do is discourage people from not coming in, you know, until they really needed 30-40% rate increase, so they get these small rate increases. If we do this, you know, this would be probably about a May implementation, which is why it's a 2% increase in rates.
It's in the budget initially, but before we would ever file it with the PSC, we would get commission approval to do so. So it'd be back in front of you again, but with the budget, we just plugged it in.
And the number would be about $100,000 of revenue in 2015, and then it would obviously be a little bit higher going forward because of a full year rate increase.
The logic for waiting till May?
The logic of waiting till May is, you know, we'll get the electric one kind of put in, get people comfortable with that one. We don't want to hit them twice back to back with those rate increases, so give a little bit of time on that. If the commission feels otherwise, I mean, we can do it kind of whenever we want to make that happen. Operating expenses, as Jim kind of mentioned before we started, it's kind of a benign budget. There's not a lot happening in it. We have no new positions budgeted in 2015. Health insurance has seen a 0% increase in our premium costs. There's actually a 0.2% reduction in our retirement costs. Our total electric budget, operations budget's up 0.8% from the 2014 budget. And a lot of that is non-controllable costs. There's only about $67,000 that's in O&M. Everything else is either purchase power, depreciation, or taxes that's increasing that budget. And our water operation expense budget's down about $330,000. The well cleaning, if you take that out, that was $260,000 we had budgeted last year. We're still looking at about a $70,000 increase from 2014's budget to this year's budget. And that joint meter allocation is responsible for part of that decrease. Kind of another short little history lesson, but in 2012, when all the AMI meters were put in place, those are the charges that the sewer utility was charged in 2013, and that increase was quite a substantial jump because of all those new meters that were put in place. So that, I forget if that went up right around $60,000, $70,000 from one year to the next, just because of the inputs that were put in there. Last year, as part of the budget process, we decreased that joint meter allocation by $50,000 for 1 year to kind of help out with the budget, kind of smooth out that increase that happened the prior year, with the understanding that it was a 1-year reduction in those fees. So this year, that $50,000 reduction is taken off, so that number jumps back up to where it should be calculated at. And why the operating expenses decrease, again, this is one of these PSC things where joint meter allocations, they require you to decrease the expenses as opposed to treating them as revenue. So when we get to look at the operating expenses in the water division, you're gonna see some of the numbers. August 31st, any numbers are actually higher than where we expect to end the year in December, and that's just because of this joint meter allocation that'll happen at the end of the year. Will decrease those expenses as opposed to increasing revenue.
On the personnel area, has there been any consideration to apprenticeships?
Well, we have 3 lineman apprentices right now, and the reason we have those is because we're projecting a couple retirements in the near future. So we have that. We also then have our summer help that each department fills out in around March timeframe, I think, Dale, where we bring in either a student from Mid-State Tech or somebody else, just like a college student for the summer. But those are really the only apprenticeship programs that we have.
How about for your area?
Well, before I had an electrical engineer, we thought about bringing in some type of engineer that's going to college for the summer, but now that I have a permanent staff person, I don't need one.
And we're probably where the number you want to be with electric. I don't think you probably want another apprentice in the electric side
No.
at this point, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's no value on the water side.
Apprentice for the water side, Dale, is there any value to that?
At this point, you know, I use help, but you don't really need it at this point.
I guess where I'm coming from is, you know, one of the things we're trying to encourage is getting our high school and mid-state students as well geared towards STEM. And this operation is a logical place to have apprenticeships to encourage and expose students to electrical and water operations
Yeah.
and get familiar with what those are and the fact that they can be good challenging jobs.
Yeah, what I do, and I have actually a student coming in a couple weeks, is I do a shadow program. So if you have a high school senior and he may have an interest in the engineering field, or the line crew field, or a meter tech type thing, they can definitely contact me and spend a couple hours here, and at least we walk them around and show them what we do, so that kind of gives them an idea of, is it a field I might be interested in. So I do that, and like I said, I have one coming up in a couple weeks where a person is staying. So.
Anything? No? Okay. Just starting to walk through some of the financial statements then, if you look on page 4, which is our consolidated income statement, this is the highest level of summary of, it includes both our electric and water utilities together. You can see we're estimating our 2014 ending numbers to be a little bit lower than where we budgeted last year. We're going to end 2014. And it's definitely, you know, down from where we ended up 2013. A couple reasons for that, and we'll talk about those when we look at each of the utilities. And we are expecting everything to bounce back up, mainly because of the electric rate increase that we're projecting will be in place by January of 2015, and then the water increase. Those numbers will turn around, and we expect our 2015 net income to be right around 2.4 million. So on page 5, just kind of walking through the income statement of the electric utility. Our 2014, we are missing our operating income. The main reason we're missing that is because our revenue projections we didn't meet our revenue projections because we didn't have our rate increase in place in time. We expected that to happen kind of mid-year and had that built as a mid-year 2 to 3% increase in our rates last year, or this year. Since that didn't happen, we're not meeting our revenue requirements this year. Everything else pretty much meets our purchase power. We kind of expect that to be pretty close. We budgeted pretty good, so we got, with the higher winter, with a little bit lower summer, we kind of ended up to where we probably would have been with a normal year. Walking through those, there's really not a lot of anything that stands out that's real noteworthy, but we can walk through a little more of the detail on page when we get to the actual revenue and expenditure detail. This is just rolling up those numbers.
Miscellaneous, non-operating income.
Most of that number is contributions, so when somebody wants a line extension or a new industrial customers coming in. Last year we had quite a few. Farmland management ended up, beginning of 2013, they had a large something done out there. I'm not sure what they had out there, but it was about an $80,000 job that they had out there. We had CVS Pharmacy come up. Midwest Cold Storage had their big expansion happen out there. Swiderski put up a few apartment buildings, so it's just a lot of those projects that happen. Those are kind of outside our realm of what we can control. So last year we had a lot. This year we'll have some increases with the Beer and Business Park, the electric pieces for that, so that number will be a little bit higher than where we're sitting right now. But again, it's just dependent on what the industries do in the area.
Jim, the purchase power, I know you, I think Glue did a pretty good job.
Well, we
on
have
short end.
the
Was it
last
some increase?
4 years, we've actually either decreased wholesale rates or kept them flat. This year there's a small increase built into the Glue budget of 1.5% to 2%. While we're talking about that, the annual meeting for Glue this year is the 15th of October, but it's all the way over in Manitowoc this year, so I didn't know if any commissioners are interested in attending. Let me know, send me an email or something. You'll probably, if you do, probably want to get a hotel room, because the meeting doesn't start till like 3 or so in the afternoon, and then gets over in the evening after dinner, so.
Chairs were.
Last year it was in Marshville?
Correct. But yes, they've done a good job with all the changes we made in the portfolio when I first got here to keep them flat or decrease the rates over the last 4 or 5 years, and now this year there is a small increase built in, but it really, from Jeff's numbers, really shouldn't impact us too much.
This ATC thing is resolved as far as the...
The holdco?
Yeah.
No, that's coming up. That'll be on our plate here in the next few months, deciding what we want to do.
And what about the UP?
Press Isle ended up in our favor. Michigan ended up seeing, the UP ended up seeing 90% of those costs, and the state of Wisconsin only 10. So we actually got some large rebates from the MISO because we were paying the increased charges for a few months before it got resolved. So it ended up going in our favor, which is good.
When we budgeted 2014, we were right around a 40% MISO increase, and it's going to be closer to 30, especially with some of those rebates that we got back this year. So MISO charges didn't go up as much as we were anticipating. Taking a look at page 6, this is breaking down and just showing us what we expect our rate of return to be, which is taking our operating income and dividing it by our average rate base. So most of this page is just showing how we get to our average rate base, taking our utility finance plant, estimated materials average, and then the average accumulated depreciation, adding back in that regulatory liability to get to what we expect our average rate base to be for 2015. So that number is $27.47 million. Dividing it by what we estimate our operating income is going to be, which is $1.3 million. Our rate of return would be 4.76. When the rate case goes through, we're still expecting that number to be 5.75, so we're going to be a little bit lower than where we're even going to be authorized, kind of right out of the gate. So unfortunately, with where we're at with that process, it's probably going to be a year sooner than when we would have next had increased rates, just based on that lower rate of return that would be set by the PSC.
Timing for that, the first of the year?
Last we heard, we're still expecting October hearing and November implementation. I got an email from our analyst yesterday saying they're going to start sharing some information with us, hopefully today, as far as where they expect those rates to be. So I think we're getting close, finally. But since October's next week, we're getting that's not going to hit October, but we'll see.
Yeah.
On page 7 is our electric utility revenues. We talked about that 5.25% rate increase that we have built in here. But if we look at our usage over the last couple of years, there's a little downward trend in usage. So what this budget is, to be conservative, we're estimating about 0.6% of reduction in energy usage on the residential and general service side. And then the commercial and the industrial side is a flat usage from 2014. It's kind of how we're estimating those numbers. And if you take a look at the graph on the chart here, these are our power purchases since 2011. You can see they are trending down a little bit, so just because of some of the conservation things and whatnot that are happening in the area, power is starting to go down a little bit. And again, because of that colder winter, if we would have had the cooler summer without the cooler winter, that drop between 13 and 14 would have been a lot more significant. So I don't know if there's anything specific on page 7, but that's where we came up with those revenues. The last line in the sale of electricity, the power cost adjustment clause at this point is an estimate. The PSC will set where that energy cost is going to be set when we calculate our PCAC, or our purchase cost adjustment clause. Ideally, the first year when you have it, you're as close to zero as possible, and then that fluctuates based on where your costs are and where your energy costs increase over the next couple of years. So if energy costs increase more than what we estimate that going to be, that PCAC will increase or decrease accordingly. So it's really a zero-sum game. If your expenses increase, your PCAC is going to increase to offset that cost. Other than that, on the expense side, our biggest cost is cost of power on page 8 and 9. Go ahead.
The Pelican Street, it appears that it's going up.
What was that? The
public street and highway lighting, the budget goes up.
Yep, and that's primarily that 5.25% rate increase.
Okay. What will be the impact of, like, 8th Street LEDs? Is that going to actually help this overall?
Well, there's two components to what we charge for streetlights. There's the cost of the energy, and then there's the cost for maintenance of the actual light. So with the LED lights, it really varies across the state on what those rates are, and the PSC actually sets those rates, and they won't tell you how they set those rates, which is very frustrating. But so they'll take, and they'll say there's, your light costs $1,000, and it's going to last you 10 years or 15 years. So they figure out a cost of depreciating that light over that 10 to 15 year time period, and then the cost of the pole, and I don't know if they have a piece in there that if that pole gets hit and you need to replace it and all this stuff. But they build in all these different costs into it, so you've got the cost of what that light is, and then you've got the energy cost. Obviously, the energy cost will go down substantially on these LED lights, but this cost of maintaining that light could increase on there.
So until we get our rate case numbers back on the LEDs, we don't know, I guess is the answer.
I mean, and if you pull tariffs from across the state, they're really across the board. Some of these guys are paying $19 a month for an LED light, and some people are paying $9, so it just depends on how they came up with the number when they came up with it.
And it's all FERC or
Well,
PSC formula.
It's the PSC formula, and they consider it a proprietary formula, and do not want to share it.
Okay.
Public, huh?
So on the expense side, page 8 and 9, we're estimating roughly about a 2% increase in increased power costs from where we're ending 2014. Some of that's on the MISO side is about a 10% increase in rates. ATC's got an increase of about 7% in their estimated rates, and then the power cost increase. Other than that, going through these, when we went through these costs, we took our labor costs and we inflated them by roughly 2.5% for 2015. Looked at our other costs, our supplies, services, consultants, those kind of things, increased those by 3%, and then looked at each category and made any necessary adjustments, looking at prior years, looking at a 12-month rolling average, looking at what we expect is going to happen in 2015 to get where these numbers are at right now. So again, it's a pretty conservative budget. There's no new initiatives. The few increases that are in there are pretty self-explanatory. If you look at them, you can kind of understand that, looking at the trends and where we're expecting to end up the year, where we're at.
Any specific questions on the line items? I know there are a lot of them, but I can thank FERC for that.
So if there's no questions, we can look at the water utility. Starting on page 10, the water utility income statement there. Again, you can see revenues go up a little bit. They go up about $100,000, near $100,000 from where we expect to end 2014. And that's that 2% for the simplified rate case. Miscellaneous revenues go down a little bit. Our miscellaneous revenues are the tower rent for the companies that put the cell phone towers up on our water towers. One of the companies did leave us in 2014, so we lost kind of one company. Sprint merged their two together. They had the two-way radio connection to with Nextel, and they've abandoned those towers, so that's why that revenue is a little bit lower.
Is that the main source?
Of the miscellaneous revenues? Yes. I mean, if we take a look at when we get to page 12, you'll see what breaks out the miscellaneous revenues, and that's by far between that and then the cost for the sewer fee, the portion that we can call revenue, those are the majority of that miscellaneous revenue. Looking at page 11, calculating our rate of return the same way that we do with the electric, in our average rate base, taking the operating income and dividing it by that average rate base, we're looking at about a 4.35% rate of return, which puts us in a pretty good shape, I think. We should be good for several years after the simplified rate case. If things stay as they're going right now, there wouldn't be need for a full-scale rate case for several more years after 2015. You see the operating income is just right over $1 million is what we expect 2015 to end up with. So as we mentioned before about the simplified rate case, our last rate increase was in 2011 on the water side. So we have 5 years to kind of pull the trigger on the simplified rate case, so that's kind of why we're expecting this 2015. I believe a lot of simplified rate cases went in just because of the extreme cold costs. A lot of utilities needed to recoup those costs. In 2014, we were lucky enough to have, some of the reserves in place to ride that out for a while. But if you're a smaller utility and you had to deal with a cold, you couldn't, so they put these simplified rate cases in just to get the additional money quicker.
And FEMA has turned us down twice now on relief. The state has filed it twice with FEMA and turned down both times. So our costs are our costs, I guess.
And on the miscellaneous revenue, you can see the forfeited discounts are our late fees. Service revenues are the reconnect fees if somebody's disconnected. Rent from the water properties, the tower leases on the cell antennas.
That's the big piece.
Yeah, and then the sewer fee. The portion we can claim as revenue is the return on the meters. Everything else gets reduces expenditures. So we're looking at just about $5 million in operating revenue in 2015. And again, we kind of on the expense side, on page 13 and 14, we use the same 2.5% increase on labor. Other costs by roughly 3%. Again, looking at each category, making adjustments as necessary where we expect the year to end. And as I was talking about the joint meters, if you look particularly on page 14, that's where most of the joint meter costs that we allocate out. If you look at the customer accounts expense, you can see we're actually projecting 2014 to be $20,000 lower than where we were in August, and that's just because of that adjustments done at the end of the year, and we'll reduce those expenses by that much.
And the maintenance of wells and springs, the big difference year to year is we won't be cleaning that raining well, is that?
Exactly.
Shouldn't have to for several years now since we've got them all done. Or what, 8 or 9 at least.
Yeah, average between 8 and 12 years.
And that's our budget, kind of in a nutshell. I don't know if there's any other questions or concerns or things.
You're looking for a 3% rate increase?
On the water side, yes.
And I thought earlier you had 2%. Is that what your plans are, that you won't get 3%?
Well, it'll be a mid-year implementation.
Okay.
So if we implement it, it'll be a 3% increase in the rates, but we'll only recognize 2% of that revenue in 2015 because how the way the budget's built right now, we wouldn't implement that till April or May.
Will 3% be easier to get through than 30%?
We'll find out. They tell us it is.
It'd be easier to sell to the community.
I think that, I guess maybe over the past year before Jim got here, we neglected to increase the rates. I think it's always a 2 little increments as we really see fit rather than, a big chunk.
Well, when we did that in 2011, they hadn't increased water rates forever, so that's why it was that large number. But if you look at what's being approved by the PSC now, I mean, some of them are 80, 90%, 50% water increases in
Really?
communities, so.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, in Detroit, they feel it's a God-given right to have water.
They do.
And
they shouldn't be disconnected if they don't pay for it,
yeah,
right?
and of course, Detroit can probably hardly find a person to go to disconnect water or turn it back on.
So, yeah, but they're saying, as Jeff's mentioned earlier, this is like a month turnaround on this simplified, so we'll see. After the experience on the electric side this year, I have my doubts.
Maybe we should start earlier.
Yeah, well, maybe we should do it the first quarter next year.
Good. Any other questions on the budget?
Not really.
Okay.
Very well done.
Thank you.
I do have another item that I would like to just bring up.
Okay, we can bring it up and talk about it, but we can't take any action yet until we agenda it again, just so you know, yeah.
Right.
Whatever the item is, I don't know, but.
Well, it's just to make sure you and all the commissioners are up to speed. We've formed REGI, the Regional Economic Growth Initiative, as you're all aware, I think. We're now officially a 501c3 corporation. One of the key things that we wanted to do is, as our businesses want to expand, or as someone would come to look at this community to position a business, the infrastructure is a key question, and to have the facts organized and available and communicable, okay, is very important. So the consultant we've hired to do that infrastructure study will be in town the week of October 6th. And right now, I'm hoping that on the 8th, that perhaps Jim, you and Dale and Todd could be available to talk to these folks and to bring them up to speed on just where we stand as a Waterworks and Lighting Commission. And obviously, any of the commissioners that are interested in sitting in on that would be very welcome. But it's basically to build a database, if you will, of where we stand, and then they will also analyze where we stand versus competitive communities, okay? So that should be good information for us as well when the final report comes out as to where we stand competitively.
Okay. For right now, I'm open on the 8th, so that'll work out.
Good, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Well, I think the staff did a very good job with the budget. If there's no other questions,
I've got I don't know if it's a question or a statement, but I honestly think from listening to everybody here that this is a decent budget and that we are doing our best. And I feel that in us doing our best, that some of our customers should do theirs also, and not put us out there as the fall guy because there's a squirrel in the area. So I just feel that we're doing all right. And I had another word to use and I'm not going to. I'll leave it at that.
okay, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
There's no other questions or comments. Is there a motion to approve the budget as is, or if there's anything you want to change in the budget, but we would need a motion?
I would move to approve the budget as proposed.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion's been made by John, seconded by Joe to approve the budget as is. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, Commissioners. I know this is usually one of our more grueling meetings, but took the normal amount of time, about 2 hours it takes us every year on the budget, so.
But the staff did a good job, thank you.
So
Yes,
yeah,
we'll need a motion
on
to
the
adjourn.
well, I guess we do, don't we?
I'll move to adjourn.
Okay,
Second?
okay,
There you go.
we're adjourned.